All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining in on this month's webinar that we'll be talking about lighting tips and tricks, and we'll be actually introducing some of the rotate, translate, and mirror, making sure that you set your lighting up for that. But before we get into that, like I said, welcome everybody. I'm Dustin Smith. I'm one of our applications techs and trainers, and also Dan is in the chat. He'll be fielding any questions for you. Both of us take in third-party inspection, do those projects for you. We do the training in person and webinar. If everybody wants to go to the chat room, I thought it'd be fun if everybody commented their favorite candy. And if you participate in Halloween, like myself, I selfishly buy the candy that I want to hand out, just hoping that there are some leftovers. So jump in the chat. I'd love for all you to comment on your favorite candy in there to get the chat going, some comedy. And Dan was joking around that I should have all you guys guess what my favorite candy is. And I will say that I love coconut, chocolate, and almonds. So if you know that answer, throw it in there. One person says peanut M&Ms. That's really good. I want to try the new caramel ones. I haven't tried those yet, but all right, enough about candy. Let's get into the webinar here. Before we jump into October, I always like to do a review of last month's webinar. Last month we talked about true position. We talked about the different versions that you could have with material conditions. So we talked about regardless of feature size, where you get no bonus tolerance. And then we talked about least material condition and maximum material condition. With those different conditions, modifiers on your blueprint callouts, with the true position, you actually get bonus tolerance depending on the size of your through hole or your pin. And when we talked about when we're tolerancing true position, we need to make sure that if we get one of those modifiers that we select in MicroView, if it is a hole or it is a pin, because that will matter depending on the type of feature and the bonus you get in there. Had a couple questions at the end of last month's webinar asking certain true positions, and we were able to follow up with a couple customers with some difficult true position callouts. So I want to extend that invite as well. Email Dan or Dustin or both of us at atiquality.com. And if we can see your print and possibly a picture of the part, we'd be able to help you out, making sure that your datums are being set up correctly and the true position tolerances and all the modifiers are set up correctly if you're seeing some things that are a little weird there. We also talked about if you have true position in different sections of your part on different surfaces, if you have touch probe or rotary, how to use those a little bit and showing those off. If you are interested in exploring those options, if your MicroView doesn't have those add-ons, feel free to email sales@atiquality.com. And most likely me and Dan will take a look at your prints and see what the best option for those add-ons would be to make sure that you're able to get the measurements you need. So this month, I thought we would take a topic that a lot of us, well, all of us should be using every time we're programming. In training, Dan and I both say that we spend the most time on our programs in lighting. It's going to make your program the most repeatable program and most accurate program if you're using the correct lighting on each individual feature. One thing that I like to say is that even if you have one diameter and you're taking 6 measurements around that diameter, you could have different lighting for every single tool that you use to measure that diameter. So we're going to explore a lot of options today. A lot of this might be review for you guys and practices that you're using daily. Hopefully you get at least one tip or trick out of today. And just like I was talking about with true position and helping you guys out with the right tolerances and right measurements, if you guys have really difficult parts that you are having a difficult time finding the right lighting, feel free to email us with a picture and the blueprint, and we could maybe suggest, even better if you could send us the part and we can try to figure out what the best lighting for that would be amazing. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was building confidence in your lighting selection. So I'm going to show you a couple tools to pay attention to when you're measuring to make sure that the lighting is getting the best measurement on there. And we'll talk about on clear reflective parts. I got a couple parts that I'll show you pictures of that we'll be measuring. And then I want to talk about setting up lights for success while you're translating, rotating, and mirroring. If you don't use these options here, we're going to talk about how to set up, translate, rotate, and mirroring. And like I said, just making sure that you have the right lighting set up before you do those options, because after you translate, mirror, or rotate, you already created all these other measurements that you're gonna have to go and adjust that lighting. So making sure you have the best lighting before doing that will make your life a lot easier. If you've gone through basic training, you've seen this slide. If you've gone through your basic training manual, it's one of the first pages in the manual. And I just wanted to bring it up because it's super important when we're finding the right lighting and the right zoom and magnification for each individual measurement we take. The microview is measuring in grayscale. It's looking for the lightest of light and the darkest of dark to be able to scan that edge and place your tool on there. So that's the whole goal of selecting the best lighting, is to get that sharp, crisp edge on whatever feature you're measuring. This is also in the basic training manual. I just want to review, because a lot of times I will, even when I'm programming, I won't think of a certain lighting option or skills that you used to use or you kind of haven't used in a long time. So just a little refresher is that we can control the lighting in many different ways. Your three main lighting options are profile light, which is the light coming from the bottom. You have your surface light, which is the LEDs that you see on your microview. And I like to say you select it in the red donut right here. And then you have your axial light in the middle. The axial light, if you look on the right side of your camera, you'll see a little black box. There's a light in there that's shooting off some mirrors straight down at a part. Real good for turned parts, highly reflective parts. You'll see some good options with that. And also with the surface lights, we can break it up into 4 different styles. We can break it up into an octants, where you can use just one slice of the pie or multiple around. You can use just the ring lights. So depending on the type of ring light you have, there's either 2 ring lights of the LEDs or there's 5. So we can control all that. And also segments. So not only can you select what ring you're using, you can also select what octant you're using on there. And you'll see when I use rotate, there's a couple options when you're rotating that if you just use the octants, but you're at a weird angle on the part, and when we rotate, you'll actually see the lighting switch from octants to segments automatically to get the best angle for that. And I'll show you guys that in a little bit. Just a little review of translate, rotate, and mirror. When you're translating, you have 2 different options when you're translating, is that if you have a part fixture that has multiple parts on there, you're able to write one program for one part and translate it across the fixture. So you can measure as many parts as you can fit on your fixture. And like I said, when you're writing your program on the first part, making sure that your lighting is really good for every single feature, because as soon as you translate, and if you put it across your stage and you have 100 parts on there, you're not going to take the time, or it'll take you forever to go through all those parts and translate and fix the lighting on all your translate. You also can translate if your part has similar features across the part. So in this example down here, we have a bunch of rectangle parts or features on this part. So measuring just one feature on it and then translating across the part, it'll do it all for you. Rotate, I'll show you that in a little bit on a gear of setting your specific lighting for each feature before I rotate. And then mirroring, if you have symmetrical parts or if you have right and left parts, like if you're making, for example, bicycle parts, you got a left and a right handle, a left and right pedal, anything like that, you're able to mirror just features on a part, or you can actually mirror the whole program for a left and right part on there. So here's a couple pictures of the parts that I'll be measuring today. Thank you to a couple of you that sent in parts for me. Through trainings, we've come across difficult features on parts that we're trying to find lighting for. This part in particular, the one in the middle on the left side, it's got a sphere, half of a sphere feature that I have to measure, and getting the right lighting on a reflective part while I've got weird angles of that surface coming down might be a challenge today, but we're going to go with it and we're going to do it live. This little gear right here up on my V block is the one that we're going to rotate. I wanted to put it on the V block here instead of putting it on the glass, just to demonstrate sometimes with fixturing, you're not able to use the profile light coming through the fixture, so you really have to tune in your surface lights on that. And we got a clear plastic cup. So not only is it a tall feature, it is also a clear part with weird angles and hills at the top that we're going to have to figure out some good lighting for. So here's just a couple different angles of the pictures. All right, let's get into actually measuring here. Get some of my screens out of the way. All right, so first measurement that I wanted to take is we have this gear that I showed you. And you can see that we're going to have to get some of these features down here. And since we can't use profile light, there's going to be a lot of shadows on these gears that we have to get rid of with lighting to get that sharp, crisp edge on there. And then later on, I actually got another part that I found that has, it's a clip, it's a white plastic clip that a lot of the features next to each other are casting shadows on top of each other. So not only is it finding that sharp, crisp edge on the feature that you're measuring, it's also dealing with any light that's around, casting shadows from other features. And on that topic, I will mention, we talk about it in basic training, and usually when we're about to install the machine at your facility, we look at the ambient lighting that's around your machine. Ambient lighting can have a huge effect on your programs. Currently in my office, I have a big, large window behind me, and this morning, setting up for the webinar, the sun was coming in from the east, shining right on the microview, and I tried to get a picture of it to show you guys, but it was right on the microview. So if I was going to program on my microview with that sun shining through the window, and then we go into the afternoon, and especially now that it's becoming late fall, winter time, I say winter time because here in Chicago we already got snow. I am kind of happy about that, but if the light was shining on the stage in the morning, I wrote a program, and then we get to second or third shift and they go to run the program, and that light, that sunlight's not coming through the window anymore, all the measurements could be off because we had all that ambient lighting. Now that's a really dramatic example of ambient lighting, but it could even be that a workbench behind or next to your microview, if it's motion censored. I was at one customer that, you know, when somebody walks up to the tool bench, the light, overhead light pops on, they work, and then they walk away and it goes off. If you have something like that, it could affect that just as much as that dramatic sunlight coming through the window. So when you're programming, make sure that the ambient lighting around you can stay consistent throughout the day. If your microview is next to a window, get some blinds. You can even black out the windows. If you have any desk lamps or overhead lights, make sure they're always the same. If they're on, keep them on when you're running the program. If you have fluorescent lights or any lights above the microview that you notice you come in one day and the lights went out overnight, put in that request of maintenance to have it replaced right away, because it's very important for your measurements that you have that consistent lighting around there. So let's get to measuring. So I got this part that I'm going to want to do some lighting on these edges here, on these gears. But the first thing that I need to do, if I'm going to rotate, translate, or mirror anything, is set up a system. So when I'm measuring my part, when I'm setting up a system, I take my time to set up a pretty decent system to get the program up and running. If you've joined the previous webinars, it probably sounds like a broken record that you set up a system to get your program up and running and then fine-tune the system after that. So I got a nice feature up here that I got a diameter and a somewhat straight line on the side, so I can set up an origin and a skew. And you notice with this feature, especially high reflective or metal parts, you see a lot of different gray values in the features that you're trying to measure, and that's what we're trying to get rid of, to get that darkest of dark to lightest of light contrast in those pixels. So, but to get my program up and running, I'm just going to create a quick system that after I create this system, I'm going to take even more accurate measurements that will be repeatable to set up a better system that's more fine-tuned and will be able to make my program even more repeatable. So I'll take a quick circle and I'll just do a line. And then this doesn't always work, but I always like when I'm writing a program to at least give it a try, is when I set my origin as Z, so I'm going to take a focus point on this surface here. You want to zoom in as much as you can in the mechanical zooms to get an accurate Z measurement. But to get my program up and running, instead of having to wait for the camera to do the magnification, I'm just going to take a low mag focus point on the surface, and then I'm going to go redo a high magnification focus point on there. So I'll set my origin of X and Y to my diameter. I'll set my origin of Z to my focus point, and I will skew to my line. So now I want to get a better measurement of this diameter, because that just quick surface light on the diameter might not be repeatable. If this diameter, the F-scan, catches any of these gray values, it could actually throw off my origin. So now I'm going to do a high magnification, and we can see all the different gray values here. So I want to adjust some of my lighting. Most of the time, if you're thinking you want to shine light right at the feature that you want to measure, right now my mind first goes to, I just want to use the lights coming from the rear. But you can see that it doesn't really get rid of any of these gray values in this chamfer or the beginning of the thread here. So I'm going to switch to my front and see what that looks like. And you can notice, I'll switch back and forth so you guys can see it. This starting with thread right here is less prominent when I use the front lights. When I use the rear lights, you really see it show up.
You can listen here. Take a chair.
So when we use the front lights, you're actually able to see less of that lighting, or less of that thread right there. So I think that's a good lighting. So I'm going to do a circle, and I'm going to do more inputs, and I'm going to use an F-scan arc on this feature here. So here's one of the things that you can say more confident in your measurements and your lighting selections, is that if we look at our points view over here, you can see that there's nothing way too far off the best fit circle. And when we look at our camera window, we can see all the blue dots that are on the edge. That's the F-scan tool, scanning that line, placing 100 points on that edge, and getting that crisp measurement on there. The only thing that I might make this better for lighting is switching over segments and just checking out what my front lights and the outer ring looks like. Kind of looks pretty similar. I'm going to switch over to my... So that all kind of seems very similar. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep just all the octants on my front lighting there. And so now, if you're unfamiliar with rotate, you could either rotate a whole feature or rotate just an input. So I want to rotate just this arc around the diameter because I don't want to have to go and set lights for every 90 degrees of using this arc tool around. I want to let the software do it itself. One thing to keep in mind, and it's very important, is when you are rotating, you have to rotate about a system. So right now I have my system in the center of this diameter. So when I say rotate about system 4, it's going to go around system 4. If I had another system that was in the corner of my part and I said rotate about that system, it's going to rotate about that system and it's not going to be on my feature. So even though, especially last webinar when I talked about true position, it is super important to have your system reflect your datum structure. But if you are using rotate and translate tools and mirror tools to program faster, you can set up a system on just a specific feature, but then make sure to go down to the system feature icon. You can click it and then go up to your datum structure system and copy it once you've rotated. But I'm going to come down to my inputs. I'm going to right click on my inputs and I'm going to say rotate. And I'm going to say I want to rotate every 90 degrees and I want 3 copies because I already have 1 arc here and I want to create 3 more copies. So I'll say OK. And now you can see that my feature went gray and I have my 4 arcs in my input. So I can right click on my circle and come up to remeasure and it quickly goes around. And I really like that this last arc here throws a really bad measurement on here because I want to show that it's not always perfect and sometimes you'll have to do different measurements on there. So one thing that I want to show you guys in case you missed it is everybody look at my lighting control window. When I right click and say remeasure, it automatically turns the lighting selection that I used for the first arc and rotates it with my measurement. And I'm going to show off something that's even cooler and really smart of Inspec when we do the gears. But right here, I'm going to go ahead and just hit auto light, see what happens there. I'm going to adjust my tool. And sometimes you just need to update the tool for it to scan the surface you want. But I want to just make sure, I'm going to switch over to my segments and just make sure that there's no better lighting that we can get on here. So now I got rid of just using my inner ring light and just that octant. So just this certain segment. I got rid of a lot of that gray value that was on the top surface and I got almost rid of all the inside surface there. I'm going to bump my lights up just a little bit. That, in case you forgot from training, is you can click on the slider bar and use your scroll wheel to go up 0.5%. And it doesn't like that. Even that, I think that was just 1% that I changed there. So that's good that we're coming across this because it does not like that lighting and the tool will not measure that feature. So we're going to bump the lights up a little bit more and we got that. Now that's a lot of lighting for that feature, and one thing to build your confidence in your lighting selection is you might have to run a few parts to make sure that this certain tool, if this tool is giving us some problems and something with the reflection off of this side of the surface, even though it's the same surface on the whole feature, when you run a few couple parts, you can actually do a trial and see if that lighting and that measurement is repeatable. And if it's not, you need to go and explore different lighting options on there. So spend a little time on getting it to, your points view to look real good, all the blue points that it took on the surface to look real sharp and just on the edge you want, not all scattered all over the place. And then run a few parts and see if that consistently, repeatably runs on multiple parts there. So now we got a better circle for our origin. Now I'm going to come down to this surface here. And like I learned before of using the opposite lighting of what instead of shooting light from the left side to hit that edge, I'm going to bring light on the right side to cast that shadow. And now we can see that it got rid of all that gray value on, if it's a chamfer or whatever that edge might be over there. Using all the lighting just coming from the left, that actually looks pretty good too and gets rid of anything. And we got a nice crisp line right here that we can measure. I'm just going to switch back over to this one, see which one I like more. So going with the left side, it seems like I get less gray values on the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. So not every single time it's the opposite, and you might want to use the lighting coming from the edge that you're looking for. So I'm going to do a line, more inputs, F-scan line. Check my edge out. All my blue points look good. It's coming in a little bit there, but my points view looks pretty well. Now, if you have an edge like this, we talked about in previous webinars that you can use outlier rejection, and you'll be able to eliminate some of those outlier points that you don't want to help you even more fine-tune your measurements there. And you guys might notice too, because my lighting, the way that I have my lighting set up is I'm getting that dark value here on the left side, and I have my arrow where that tool is scanning coming from the best contrast area inwards. If I flipped it, you can see over here it's starting to grab more points on the surface, and my points view is a little more abstract than that straight line that I get there. So now I got that. I got an even more refined system going. I'm zoomed in, so I'm going to do another focus point. And now I'll reset my system to lighting and tools that are more focused and more refined to get a better system, better datum structure set up. So lighting is not just important for the features you're trying to measure. Lighting is important from the very beginning of taking your very first measurement on there. So origin of Z to my new focus point and skew to that new line. And you can even see here in my schematic window, I'll zoom in, that my two lines that I took at different lighting are actually different areas, and it took different edges on that surface. So this could throw off your whole datum structure and all your measurements, because if you're going from this edge to another feature or this edge to another feature, it could be tenths to thou off. All right, so now we got a good system set up. I'm going to bring my magnification out, and I'm going to go over and find my gears here. So to get a little participation going on in the chat, here's a question for you guys. If I have 16 teeth on this thread or on this gear, and I want to rotate, what's the angle that I need to rotate about to each gear? See if anybody gets the answer in the chat. If I have 16 gears, what's my rotation? What's my angle between each if they're equally spaced? Bingo. Good job, Lisa. 22.5. So I'm going to zoom in on my gear right here, and I'm going to find this. So I actually got some pretty good lighting here. It's a pretty good edge going on there. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. But let's check out the other lighting that we have. So I want to do coming at this angle. So now see how that edge just got a little more crisp on that edge. I'm going to do the whole. We got a little more gray value in there. I want to just do the outer lights We're getting a lot of reflection off of the gear tooth on that, so I do not like that. Same thing, a lot of gray values just using my inner ring light. I want to try using from the opposite side. Now this lighting, my first reaction is that's pretty, like, that's a good define. I got a lot of dark value in my camera, but also if you notice, I lose part of my edge right there. So even though I got really good contrast behind my part and on the outside of my part, I actually lose some of my part because the light's not shining to it. So I actually really like this lighting right here, and it's going to be able to show off how in spec, when we rotate, how it'll actually switch from segments to octants because of certain angles that it's getting at. So I'm going to go ahead and do another circle, and I'm going to use this tool closest edge. When I use closest edge and I click and I move away from my point, my part, you see this arrow right here, and we'll see that it's getting the wrong point. This arrow is scanning in towards trying to find the first contrast, the first edge that it sees, and it places a point. In this area right here, it's grabbing some flash or a burr or hair or whatever might be on there. I'm going to bring that in just a little bit, and you can see that that pink crosshair is going right on that crisp edge that we created on that edge. So now I'm going to right click on my closest edge tool, rotate, and we said we want an angle of rotation 22.5, and I want 15 copies because we have one gear tooth already measured, and now we want 15 copies. And again, we see that we have the gray circle because it's not measured yet. And actually I want to go ahead and delete all these points and show something with, since we have multiple systems now. When I go to rotate that closest edge and I say 22.5, 15 copies, here's that rotate about system. I want to rotate about system 8. 99.99%, it'll pull up the latest system or the system that feature is looking at if you set a different system to it. But in case you want to rotate about a different system, you can come down to that drop box. So I'll say okay. Now I'm going to rotate, I'm going to remeasure this feature. Now I want everybody to look over at the lighting control window and see what Inspect does when it rotates about these features. And then we're actually going to go in and look at the camera window after that and see some of the features that, because of my fixturing or where it is on the stage, maybe some ambient light, that even though we have good lighting on this feature alone, it might not be good for every single feature, especially when we rotate. So I'm going to remeasure. You guys notice how it switches from octants to segments. We got a couple failed ones because of some parts that I have on the side of it. And I'll do that again for you guys. If I right click, remeasure, Inspec is smart enough to know to divide that angle of the octants by the angle that we said remeasure on there. Now doing this with the closest edge tool and knowing how the lighting is switching automatically on me using different selections, I might not want to use the closest edge tool, because if we go through the snapshots of these, you notice that it's not getting the best lighting on every single gear tooth here. Now that one's good. So what we could do is we could go in individually and change the ones that aren't getting accurate measurements there. And as I'm turning around here, I want you guys to notice my lights aren't changing. It is one little frustrating thing about how when you're looking through snapshots that the lighting doesn't update when you're looking at it. But if we right click on our input and say move here, it'll change our lighting and that tool to where it actually is on there. So something like this, we could bump up the lights a little bit more, and it takes a good measurement. So it's really up to you, whatever's quicker programming. either spending more time on your initial lighting setting or rotating it and adjusting the tools that aren't getting good lighting to lighting that fits for that specific feature. So if I right click and move here, and it might be because InSpec is switching from octants to segments that it might not be the best lighting that we want. Let's see if we just go back here. And it's still not good. So this is up to you on the programmer looking at this to spend more time on lighting or trying different tools. Since our original lighting was good, we might want to keep the lighting and select maybe best edge or just do arcs on each one of these, something that might work best for you and each individual feature. So that's rotate and switching up your lighting. Now I want to go to a part that has a lot of features around that part and a lot of features around each feature that create shadows on your other features here. So I'm moving my stage over. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see my part. All right, here we go. I'm going to bring my focus in. I want to find the feature that I want over here. All right, here we go. So I got all these different tabs, and right away, before I'm even focused in or change my lighting, you can see all the shadows that the parts are casting on itself. So right here, just looking at this part right away, I know I'm going to be battling with lighting a lot on this feature because there's a lot of shadows coming off of it. Plus, we're working with a white part that I'm not sure if white plastic or what clear plastic is the harder lighting to get to. I'm going to zoom in here so we can really see this feature. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the crosshairs so you guys can see this better. So if I want to get this edge right here, that is going to be super difficult. So we're going to have to spend a lot of time on lighting on this. And do File New to get rid of my other program. All right, so first thing I want to do is just see how bad tools are going to measure on here. And we can see in my points view, and you can see in your camera window, I'm not even close to getting that edge. So I'll hit my cancel tool, get rid of that. Let's bump up lighting a little bit. And as I bump up lighting, you can see over here the reflection is coming off, and that's going to start affecting my measurement even more because we can actually make features smaller or larger with lighting, and that's not what we want. We want accurate measurements. So I'm going to go ahead and use lighting just from this side. It doesn't seem like it changes that much at all. Lighting from this side, it just made it darker, but you still got all those different gray values. So when you're doing different lighting options and your typical or your go-to lighting just isn't working for that, start thinking outside the box. What random lighting can I use, or different lighting coming from different directions can I use? So I actually want to try, if I click the rear lights and I hold down Control and select the front lights. Now that's still not the greatest right there, but I got more of a crisp line coming off of that lighting, off of that edge, than the other features that I was getting. So I just want to see if I do align now. Now we're getting it all off on the side. So maybe that's not going to work out. So let's go ahead and try segments and just try, since I had some success with just using the front and rear lights, let's switch over to segments and try using just the outer lights. About the same right there. So let's try the inner ones. Still not getting the best lighting right there for it. but you're starting to see more of a crisp edge going on that measurement. And depending on your tolerances and what you got to do, you really have to spend time on this lighting to find the best lighting that you can on there. And using your slider bar, because auto lights might not always be the right feature or the right option for you. Now I'm going to actually try doing opposite here. And knowing that your lights, I actually want to switch back to my slideshow here. Knowing that your lights are coming from different angles. The center of the LEDs are aligned and they could be 13 degrees to 25 degrees inwards towards your camera. Keeping that in mind when you're taking these measurements is super important to know which angle the lighting is coming from. So since I've had no success finding the best lighting for this because I have a lot of gray values in the background, couple tips for you. One, turning the part 90 degrees. Seeing if that casts different shadows for some reason on your part. Might be your ambient lighting you're battling with, and you don't want to have one program that you turn off all the lab lights, or if you're on the shop floor, it's kind of hard to turn off all the shop floor lights. So try turning your part 90 degrees to see if that casts any different shadows. Couple other tips is that we have a couple customers that actually create basically like a blackout box around their microview so you have no ambient lighting. You could try that and just explore to see if even if there's something next to the microview that could be casting a shadow onto the microview, to eliminate any of those distractions in the lighting on there. So sometimes it's not just the lighting options that you're putting onto the feature with your lighting. It might be things outside of the microview and the camera window that you have to look at on there. I'm going to zoom out. Let's go ahead, and if you guys were part of last month's webinar, you guys might remember these features here. We did some true position on gaps. I want to show off mirroring, because mirroring is one of the least common use of the translate, rotate, and mirror from my experience. So quickly, I'm going to set up a system on here. I'm going to do a circle. Let me do file new. I'm going to do a circle. Since I can't see the whole circle, I'm going to say use best edge points. Get my circle. I'm going to do a quick line over here. And I'm going to set a focus point. Again, these aren't the best tools and the best magnification and everything to set up a system, but we want to get our program up and running. I'm going to set my origin of X and Y to the diameter, origin of Z to my surface, and skew to that small line. So now I'm going to come over and create a better system real quick. I'm going to take a new line, more inputs. I'm going to measure this edge, and since I select this line over here, it ties them together and it creates that whole line, so I don't have to go remeasure line 2 since Inspec already knows that. And then for time's sake, I'm going to leave that focus point, and you guys can just make sure to magnify into the surface. So I'm going to set my origin of X and Y to the circle, origin of Z, and now I'm going to skew to that longer edge to get a better system on there. So now to quickly program, or let the machine do more of the work for you, I'm going to just measure the left side of the part and mirror all the features across my part there. So I'm going to check out different lighting here. Since I have a rounded surface here, I'm not sure I want to use lights coming from the rear of the machine. I actually want to check out Axial Light. Axial Light does no good for us on this one. But you guys do notice that the surface of the part looks a little less reflective using Axial Light. So that might be a good lighting to use on that surface because you get less reflection coming off of here where your focus point might not be off. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to switch to outside ring. That looks like a little more crisp of an edge there. So I'm going to do line. Get that edge. I'm going to switch my arrow. That looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to switch over to here. I can't see my edge clearly, so remember, switch your lighting. And now I'm going to take a new line, switch my arrow. So now I got that gap there. So I'm going to do a gap between the two. And I want to do my rename, gap 1. And I want to tolerance it. Because you want to do all the tolerancing, renaming, all that stuff before mirroring or translating so it brings it all with it. I'm going to export that with. So now I can, last time when we were mirroring or when we were rotating the inputs. I want to mirror the gap. So I'm going to right click on my gap. I'm going to go to mirror. And I want to mirror about the system. Same thing with rotate. I want to mirror about a system. If I am going from the left of my origin to the right of the origin, let's see in the chat box, what do we want to mirror about? Do we want to mirror about the x-axis or do we want to mirror about the y-axis? See if anybody joins in on the chat. A little quiet today. We'll get to some questions in about 10 minutes to see if anybody has anything. Might be hard to do a Q&A with lighting because I don't have your parts or those specific features, but at least we can get those questions in and contact you guys later. So I am going to mirror about the y-axis. And when I click OK, you guys notice that nothing happened. It didn't create that other gap there. If I go and I right click and I rotate, or I want to mirror about the x-axis, still doesn't do anything. So something might not be up with my system that I'm not doing correctly here. System 6 looks good. Create copy. So here, a little troubling. You notice that it's just doing it right there. Something might be up with my skew on and my system on that. So if you're having trouble when you're trying to mirror a selection, sometimes it might be easier just to come take your measurements on there. But you see that taking those different edges on those different parts are where you want to really spend time on your lighting on that. And as soon as I get done with the webinar, I'm going to realize what I was doing wrong with my mirror, or Dan's going to text message me and say, you're silly, you were supposed to do this. But let's move on to the next feature here before we run out of time. So I got this clear, kind of really rubbery, jelly type of part on here that has a lot of features next to it, and lighting is going to be very difficult. And one feature that I wanted to show off is this angle here. So I do profile light. Since it's a clear kind of jelly part, a lot of light is coming through the features, and you can tell that the thicker that the feature is, the less light that's coming through using profile light. So it actually might be casting shadows off of itself because I'm putting light through that certain feature. So if we look here, that looks like a real crisp edge right there. But the one thing that you want to be careful about, like I said, using profile light, is that that profile light isn't coming through the part and casting a shadow through that part onto that edge. So one thing that you could be confident of your lighting is get a couple different measurements with different lighting options and see if there is a difference on the edges. So if I do a line here, and then I go back to profile light, and I take another line on that nice crisp edge, and let's do a gap between the two. Let's do a distance. I wonder if my gap tool is not working. So this one right here is, we're looking in the millions of difference. So this is where I can build my confidence that this lighting using profile light gets me that real nice crisp edge on that surface, but I'm making sure that my lighting isn't influencing my dimensions and my the scanning of that edge right there. And one thing that you could do too is with the slider bar, like we said earlier, is we could bump it up, is to get rid of anything in the background. We can bump it up slowly to get more of that light value. But another thing with, you don't want to make it too bright because that edge could become smaller on there because the light's bleeding into that surface. If we come down to where we get rid of that background, I can do another line on that edge and do distance between my two profile lights, and we're still looking like we're almost into the tenths there, so that might be too much lighting. And if we look back at our distance, now we're back really low. So I bumped the lights up a little bit to get rid of some of that background, and I did a quick measurement on the distance from line to line of the same feature just to make sure that what I think is my best lighting option is still being accurate and repeatable. And what makes this measurement repeatable is that we got rid of any of that background gray value, and we were able to get that crisp edge on there. So real quick before we run out of time here, I want to throw that clear plastic cup on there. Let's say file new, no. If you guys don't know this and you hit F8, your machine goes to load position. I'm going to clear off my stage so I don't ruin any of my LEDs or break them. And I'm going to go ahead and throw clear plastic cup on there. I want to show you the top edge of this clear plastic cup. And taking everything that we learned today about rotate and setting our system and setting our lighting and everything will come into key when we're doing this measurement. And this customer actually, real great questions when we did training. A couple months ago, I did a training seminar in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And I remember this part, so I requested to see if I could use it. And since this is one of the more difficult features that I've seen in a little while, I might do a short YouTube video on finding all these features. But one thing that I wanted to show off with this feature alone is that it's real easy to get lost on where's the ceiling surface, where's the flat surface, and all the reflection coming off of this kind of cloudy clear cup here. So one thing that I started doing, and it's not always the best option, but sometimes you get luck, is if I do a point cloud and I use the area focus, and I just got some decent lighting here, you can see the different gray values. I'm going to throw a focus area on all this, and it might mess the camera up a little bit trying to find the different values. But I can start seeing with the points view, and if I go to my side, you can start seeing different heights on the surfaces. And in my points view, if I go and I select here, you guys look to see, so I'm using the right view, and I look at my points here, and I go over my highest and Z value. In the camera window, you can see those white crosshairs, and that's telling me that that's the top surface. That's the highest surface to my camera in Z. So now, one thing that I would do to keep track of what I'm doing, I'll delete that point cloud. And since this is my highest value, I'll just do quick points of saying this focus point and rename it not the help window, top surface, or whatever you might say. So when I go through and I'm doing all these different focus points, I can keep track of where I am on my part. So when I start setting different lighting, I'm not getting lost. Right here, if we just look at these different values, different lighting values and different surfaces, unless you're really keeping track of where you are in your focus, all these surfaces look similar. And I can't tell if that's the glass, is that the bottom of the cup. So setting just little, key points for you while you're programming. And then once you're done programming, you can highlight those points that kept you organized and just delete them. And then all the other features that you measured, you're able to save in your program, rename those to the different surfaces, and be done there. So just a quick overview on all the lighting options that you do have, and spending time on specific lighting for specific tools and measurements that you use. And sometimes it always doesn't work out, and you really got to get creative with the lighting that you're using. And remember, keep track of your ambient lighting, what your surroundings look like. Remember all the different segments and octants that you have. And I do want to mention that one of the big points of doing these webinars is not only to give you guys like a continued education in InSpec and just learn little tips and tricks that we use every day when we're doing either programming or third-party inspection, anything like that. We want to arm you guys with the knowledge that we have, and we also want to hear from you guys. One of the best things about training customers, me and Dan always say, is that it's nice for us to learn something in training as well, because you guys are the ones that are measuring odd parts, different colors, different materials every day, that you guys learn things too. So we want to start conversations with you guys and help you guys out with those difficult lighting features that you need to do. So please, if you guys have anything that you're having difficulty with, or you're just not finding the right repeatable lighting for that measurement, let us help you out. Email Dan and Dustin at atiquality.com and let us know. So I'm going to open this up. I know it's 11 o'clock. I want to let you guys get back to work, do what you guys need to do today. But me and Dan will stay on here for a little bit. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send us those in the chat, or it is kind of nice, you can specifically message one of us. Go ahead and send that to us. If not, email us, or I'll be sending out my follow-up email with a survey that I really appreciate those who fill it out, because we get feedback from you guys of what topics you guys want to hear and you want to cover. And we're even opening it up to, if you got a specific part that you don't mind us using in the webinar, you could get free training on your specific part while we also train everybody else that comes in here. Next month's webinar, it's not the normal week of the month, because that week will be Thanksgiving. And so we bumped it up to November 18th. And in that webinar, we will be covering functional measurements. The functional measurements, we're talking about if your customer is using a caliper, if your customer is using a pin gauge, what construction tools to use, how to use the gap tool in the right way if your part is a mating part, that kind of things, of just things to help you equip yourself of taking the right measurement for the right feature on there. And Dan's going to be leading that webinar, and I'll be in the chat with you guys. So if you guys have any parts that you're right now battling with, you know, how do I take this measurement to best represent a caliper, a micrometer, a height gauge, those type of things, send us an email. We'd love to use those as real life examples, because that's better learning and better education, to use real life examples. So feel free to shoot any questions. If not, everybody have an awesome day, and enjoy the rest of your week.